Welcome to History What If, where we question the events that already happened. What really could have happened? Could we have changed the outcome? Before we begin, everything you're about to hear is based on historical research, facts, and records. The what-if scenarios are my own opinion and interpretation of events, designed to make you think, question, and explore history differently. This is not the official historical record. This is history, through a different lens. Today's thread, the time a major world military declared actual war on birds and lost. This is the Great Emu War. Let's go. Picture it. The year is 1932, Australia. A real country with a real army, real soldiers, and real machine guns decides to go to war. Not with another country, not with an invading force, with emus. Large, flightless, extremely confident birds. And here's the kicker, the birds win. I want to be crystal clear because people never believe me. This is not a metaphor. This is not an exaggeration for the algorithm. A nation deployed military hardware against waterfowl-adjacent dinosaurs and got humbled. It has an official name, the Great Emu War. Capital G, capital E, capital W. So today we ask the question, history is too embarrassed to ask. What if Australia had actually won? What if the humans pulled it together, beat the birds, and walked away with the dub? Spoiler, the answer is funnier than you think. But to understand how you lose a war to birds, you first have to understand how you even end up in one. And honestly, it started the way most disasters do, with a reasonable problem and an absolutely unreasonable solution. Grab your slouch hat and your sense of disbelief. We're going to 1932 Australia. Let's pull the thread. Okay, real history. After World War I, Australia did the decent thing and gave a lot of returning veterans farmland out in Western Australia. Good idea. Honor the soldiers, grow some wheat, build a nation. What could go wrong? So much could go wrong. Then the Great Depression hit, wheat prices tanked, and these poor farmers were already struggling. And just as things couldn't get worse, they got worse. Because that's when roughly 20,000 emus showed up. 20,000. Emus migrate after breeding season, and they discovered that these freshly farmed fields were basically an all-you-can-eat buffet with a sprinkler system. Free food, free water, and the farmers had even cleared the land to make running around extra convenient. From an emu's perspective, 5 stars, would invade again. The emus trampled crops, wrecked fences, and let rabbits through the gaps to do even more damage. The farmers were getting absolutely steamrolled by birds. So they did what any desperate group of struggling veterans would do. They called the government and asked for help. Now here's where it gets good. These were veterans. They knew their way around the military. So instead of asking for like fencing subsidies or pest control, they asked for machine guns. And the Australian government, instead of going absolutely not, went, you know what, that tracks. So the Minister of Defense, an actual cabinet-level official whose job was national security, signed off on sending soldiers, machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition to fight birds. There's even a rumor some officials thought the emu feathers would look great on military hats. War, but make it fashion. So that's the setup, the full might of the Australian military versus a bunch of large, confused birds who just wanted a snack. Surely this would be quick. The soldiers certainly thought so, bless them. November 2nd, 1932, day 1. The soldiers spot a group of about 50 emus. They set up the machine gun, take aim, and the emus just scatter. Turns out emus don't line up politely to be shot at. They split into small groups and sprint in every direction at like 30 miles an hour. Who knew? Emus scatter, soldier confused. It gets worse. They tried to herd the emus into an ambush. The emus split into small groups, each one seemingly led by, and I'm quoting the actual commander here, a leader bird that would stand guard while the others ate, then warn them to run. The soldiers said the emus were using guerrilla tactics, military tactics. The birds had a strategy. Then the machine gun jammed. Of course it did. At one point they mounted a gun on a truck to chase the emus down. Except the emus were faster than the truck and the ride was so bumpy the gunner couldn't aim at anything. So now you've got Australian soldiers in a rattling truck bouncing across a field missing every single bird. Cinema. And here's the detail that really seals it. The emus turned out to be absurdly tough. Soldiers reported hitting them multiple times and the birds just kept running. One observer compared them to armored tanks. Tanks! The man looked at a bird and his brain said, tank. That's the level of frustration we're at. After about a week, the numbers were in and they were humiliating. They'd burned through a huge chunk of their ammunition, and the confirmed emu casualties? Estimates range from a few dozen to maybe a few hundred, out of 20,000. The math was not mathing. The birds were winning on every spreadsheet. The whole thing got so bad that it hit the newspapers, and then it hit Parliament. Politicians started openly mocking the operation. Someone suggested the emus should be awarded medals for their performance. The military had become a national punchline, and the birds were the heroes. So the military did the only thing left to do. They withdrew. They retreated from the birds. The commander basically packed up, went home, and the emus were left standing in the fields they had successfully defended. If you're keeping score at home, emus 1, Australian Army 0. And that, incredibly, is the true story. Australia went to war with emus and lost. So now, finally, we get to the what if. Because here's the thing nobody stops to consider. What if they'd actually won? Let's pull that thread. So let's rewrite it. Imagine the machine gun doesn't jam. The truck isn't a bone-rattling disaster. The soldiers adapt to the emu's hit-and-run tactics, and instead of a week-long embarrassment, they actually clear the birds out fast and clean. A decisive, total human victory. The emus surrender. Roll credits. Humanity wins. Now, geopolitically, honestly, almost nothing changes. There's no domino effect here. Europe is fine. Napoleon's still wherever Napoleon is. The world map looks identical. A decisive win over some birds in 1932 does not reshape global history. And that is exactly where the irony kicks in. Because here's the twist. The Emu War is famous for one reason and one reason only. Australia lost. That's the whole joke. That's why we're talking about it 90 years later. A struggling military getting humiliated by birds is hilarious and unforgettable. A military efficiently solving a pest problem? Nobody remembers that. Ever. So in our humans won't timeline, the single greatest thing about this entire event, the part that made it immortal, simply never happens. There's no viral story, no headlines, no parliament roasting the army, just a quiet line in some agricultural report. Emu problem, resolved. Tragic, honestly. Think about everything we'd lose. No memes, no documentaries, no guy on the internet, making a whole video about it 90 years later. In the winning timeline, you have never heard the words Emu War in your life. You're welcome, and I'm sorry, all at once. And the emus? In the winning timeline, they're just gone. A footnote, a solved problem. No legacy, no legend. No tiny general hats in anyone's imagination. They'd be just another pest that got dealt with, like locusts or rabbits, except even less memorable. But in the real timeline, the one where they lost, the emus became immortal. By winning, those birds didn't just defend a wheat field. They accidentally guaranteed that humans would be talking about them for the next century. They lost the snack. They won the legend. So welcome to the timeline where Australia won. It's a quieter place, a more dignified place, and a profoundly more boring one. Let's see what this victory actually cost them. First casualty of victory, Australia's reputation as the country where nature is actively trying to kill you. I mean, that reputation survives anyway. They've got spiders the size of dinner plates and snakes in the toilet. But the Emu War is the crown jewel of Australia is just like that. Lose it and the legend takes a real hit. Second, the internet loses one of its all-time great, wait, that's real facts. You know the ones, the facts that sound fake but aren't, that you immediately tell 3 people about. The Emu War is S tier in that category. Take it away and the internet is measurably less fun. A real loss for humanity. Third, every comedian, every trivia host, every history meme account loses a guaranteed banger. A country lost a war to birds is a joke that writes itself and never stops being funny. In the winning timeline, all of those jokes just never get made. Comedy itself is a little poorer. And honestly, the emus deserve the win. Think about it from their side. They didn't ask for a war. They just wandered into a field looking for lunch, got shot at by the military, and instead of folding, they organized, they outmaneuvered, and they sent a professional army packing. That's not a pest, that's an underdog story. There's actually a real lesson buried in this ridiculous story. Sometimes the thing that makes you a legend isn't the win, it's the loss. The spectacular, unforgettable, can't look away loss. Nobody remembers the wheat, everybody remembers the birds. Australia, for the record, did eventually deal with the emu problem. Not with the military, but with bounties and fencing. The boring stuff that actually works. The emus were never fully defeated. They just kind of won by existing, and then quietly went back to being birds. And to this day, the emu remains a national icon. It's literally on the Australian coat of arms, chosen partly because it's a creature that supposedly can't walk backward, only forward, which is poetic because in 1932 it absolutely refused to back down from the army. The bird was on brand the entire time. So here's the big picture takeaway, the domino effect of this whole thing. Except the dominoes barely move. Because the genius of the Emu War is that its entire historical importance comes from being unimportant and hilarious. It's the rare event that matters because it didn't matter. Compare it to the stuff we usually cover, battles that reshaped continents, decisions that cost millions of lives. And then there's this, a week-long bird fiasco that changed absolutely nothing except our collective sense of humor. And somehow, that makes it one of the most beloved military stories ever told. And let's be honest about the real villain of the winning timeline, boredom. A clean victory gives you a tidy, forgettable footnote. The messy, embarrassing loss gives you a story people will tell forever. Given the choice between efficient and legendary, history always remembers legendary. So when you really think about it, the emus made the right call. They could have fled and been forgotten. Instead, they stood their ground, embarrassed an army, and earned a permanent spot in human history. That's not a bad outcome for a bird whose main goals in life were eat wheat and run fast. Now imagine the emu showing up to claim its place in the history books, and the clerk goes, "Sorry, in the winning timeline, you don't have a spot here." The emu, devastated, realizes that its entire legacy depended on Australia's machine gun jamming at exactly the right moment. So in the winning timeline, our hero emu doesn't become a legend. He just goes back to the field, eats some wheat, and lives a totally normal, completely anonymous bird life. No medals, no memes, no tiny general hat, just a guy, a bird guy, forgotten by time. And that's the brain melter. One jammed machine gun, one bumpy truck, 1 week of military embarrassment, and a flock of birds became one of the most famous things to ever come out of Australia. History isn't just shaped by the big wins. Sometimes it's shaped by the most spectacular losses, held together by tape, luck, and one very stubborn bird. Meanwhile, back in reality, the farmers still had an emu problem for a while. The war didn't actually fix it. So in both timelines, the wheat situation is kind of a mess. The only difference is whether the world gets a hilarious story out of it. And thank goodness in our timeline it did. And the emus? They'd do it all again. They'd march right back into those fields, dodge every bullet, outrun every truck, and win the only war that mattered. The war for permanent comedic immortality. These birds understood something most generals never figure out. It's not about winning the battle. It's about winning the story. So let's bring it home. The Great Emu War is famous for exactly one reason. A major military lost to a flock of birds, and the birds knew it. Take away the loss, and you take away the entire legend. It's the rarest thing in history, an event that's important specifically because it was ridiculous. It took a jammed gun, a bumpy truck, 20,000 stubborn birds, and a government decision that should never have been approved. And somehow that combination produced one of the funniest, most beloved stories in all of military history. You genuinely cannot script this. People have tried. It's never as good as the real thing. And the real lesson? History doesn't only remember the winners. Sometimes it falls head over heels for the losers. The spectacular, unforgettable, you did what losers. The Emu War wasn't won with a machine gun. It was won with a punchline, and the birds delivered it perfectly. So next time someone tells you to never give up, remember the emus. They didn't win because they were strong or smart or armed. They won because they refused to be forgettable. And honestly, that's the most powerful weapon there is. Take notes from the bird. And that's the Great Emu War, the only war in history won by the side without the guns. If this made you laugh, smash subscribe, because next week we pull another thread and break history all over again. I'll see you in the next one. What if?